Hello students, the purpose of this video is to talk with you about revision strategies and how to get the most out of your revision time over the next week or two. As always, when you're faced with any writing task for an audience, you should consider your purpose and your audience. So with your purpose, think about what the assignments require of you, both the original assignment and the revision assignment. And consider audience as well. What do your readers expect? Now, I know in this class we've been talking a lot about your audience being the students in the classroom as well as me, your professor. I've also asked you to consider a wider academic audience, to imagine a wider audience as you're writing your papers. But realistically, you know that I am your primary audience for these revisions. I'm the one who's going to be giving you the grade. So that's something to keep in mind too. When you're looking at the suggestions that I gave you, I'm going to be reading what you revise. So how can you meet those readers' expectations? So some basic assumptions here. First of all, revision means re-seeing. It really means looking at your paper in a whole new way, not simply fixing commas and apostrophes and a few spelling errors, but really seeing your paper again. It's also a great opportunity. In many cases, it's an opportunity for an improved grade. It's an opportunity to show off your best writing skills. It's an opportunity to deliver your message in an even better way. And also, I want you to remember that revision is definitely a part of the writing process, that the best writers, professional writers, the writers who get paid to do this are doing. Revision is part of the process. So the most important thing that you should do is think big and think globally. Think about your entire paper, not just little parts of the paper, at least not at first. I like to use analogies of renovating a house. So if you had a tiny little house and you wanted to add on a second story or a third story, you'd have to first really consider what that foundation can support, right? You can't just start adding stuff to it without thinking about the whole thing and the effects that those additions would have. So think about that. Again, that gets back to thinking holistically. And also, don't start making little tiny touches to sentences when you might end up getting rid of those sentences. It's kind of like if you're going to renovate your house, if you're going to renovate any house, you don't want to start painting first. You don't want to start hanging art on the walls first if you might end up knocking those walls down or moving rooms around, right? So you want to make sure that you do the big things first and work your way down to the little touches. Okay, so build the walls before you paint them. A moment ago, I used the word holistically, revise holistically. Think about your entire paper. Remember that one change that you make could have a domino effect. So if you take out something in your introduction, but the body of your paper still refers to it, it could be confusing. Or if you change your thesis and you leave the body as is, that could really throw off your entire paper. So think about how a change in one part of your essay might affect other parts of your essay. Again, think about how you're renovating a home and how a change somewhere could have effects in other parts of the house. Okay. Also, it's a good idea to help stay on track to reread the entire essay, right? Don't simply make some changes and move on. You're going to periodically need to reread your whole essay to make sure it still works as a whole. Reread the assignments and the professor's comments to make sure that you know what it is that you're going toward. Keep your purpose in mind. I don't know what that Z is there. I'm sorry about the typo. We're just going to keep on moving anyway. Should have revised better. So when you begin your revisions, as I've mentioned to you, I want you to focus on essay level stuff first, the big picture first. So things that you might do, depending upon the state of your current draft, is to rethink your thesis. Add more support. That might mean doing more reading, doing more research. It might mean cutting stuff that doesn't really fit your paper if you tend to lose focus. It might mean reorganizing, moving paragraphs around so that your argument is easier for your readers to follow. And again, remember to reread the whole thing multiple times. Remember that each essay demands different kinds of things to do, so some of these things might apply to your essay and others won't. Once you've got things done on the essay level, you can move on to the paragraph level. Look at each paragraph as a unit and make sure that it's focused and developed. So, for example, you could add stronger topic sentences, or you could take your existing topic sentence or your existing point and make it more precise, work on the wording. You could add more details, more examples. You could work on adding quotation sandwiches, introducing your quotations so they flow, following up if necessary to connect your quotations to your point. If you've got too many quotations, you might want to change some of them to paraphrase and cite your sources. Speaking of source use, you should check for plagiarism. Make sure that you're not accidentally taking someone's words or ideas and not giving them credit. Cite your sources. You might need to trim out details that don't fit, add return sentences to wrap up your paragraphs, add stronger and smoother transitions, and again, reread to make sure the whole thing is hanging together. Once you know that you're finished with essay and paragraph level revisions, then you know that you can move on to sentences. After all, you don't want to spend a lot of time fixing up sentences that you decide you need to get rid of. So once you know all the content is in your essay to stay, then you can start looking at the sentence level stuff. So there are two things that you should think about when you edit for sentence level. We call this proofreading and editing as well. When you're editing for correctness and when you're fixing your style. So let's start with correctness first. All the little errors. So the major stuff, things that distract readers the most, run-ons, comma splices, fragments, missing word endings, subject-verb agreement errors, those kinds of things. Start with those kinds of errors first, particularly if you know that you tend to make those kinds of errors. Proofread really carefully for those. One of the things that I recommend is to read your paper in backwards order, one sentence at a time from the end to the beginning. Because a lot of times, one of the reasons we're not good at proofreading our own work is that we get caught up in the story that we're telling or the argument that we're making, and we forget to look at the little things. And then you can also look for the smaller stuff that isn't quite as distracting, like apostrophe errors or spelling errors. You have some resources here. Under nuts and bolts on pages 10 through 12, you have a list of the abbreviations and markings I use when I proofread, or when I grade your paper. So start there, and if you still don't know what my markings mean, then you should definitely ask me. Also, under content, there's some proofreading practice for you, and you'll be able to find even more resources about common errors and those kinds of things. I also want to note that I just caught another little error in my presentation. Here there should be a closed quotation marks after proofreading practice, and I'm not going to start over. So let this be a lesson in good editing. Also, I want to point out that this isn't usually the kind of error that changes meaning. It's the kind of error that might distract us, but generally you know what I mean. So keep in mind how to proofread for major errors that can disrupt your meeting and distract your readers, and also some of the smaller ones that aren't as big a deal. Okay, so once you know that your grammar and punctuation seem to be in decent shape, then you can also think about your style, your writing style. This is the kind of thing that can make your formal college essay different from, say, a tweet or some other kind of social media post where it doesn't matter so much if you've got conventional punctuation, where there's all kinds of, say, acronyms and other kinds of punctuation conventions. You're choosing your style based on who you're writing for and what your purpose is. In college writing, we want you to have really precise words. We want you to be as direct as possible instead of having lots of extra repetition and redundancy. We want you to avoid big words that you're not comfortable with. We also want you to have variety in your sentence structures so that your sentences don't all sound the same, really elementary, like imagine a children's storybook for very young children. We also want you to have connective tissue between ideas, transitional words, in other words, so we can follow your train of thought. There's more information about this in the handout that I've posted called Sentence Level Revision. So I want to look at a couple of examples of where you can take a blah sentence that's not necessarily incorrect, but just needs a style makeover. So let's look at this sentence. There are many instances in which sentences are written by students in the passive voice. Now, if we had another 10-15 minutes, I would give you a little mini lecture on the passive voice, but in a nutshell, it's where passive verbs are being used instead of active ones, and the main characters in the sentence are just being passive instead of doing an action. In this case, students should be the main character, but they're just kind of sitting here at the end of the sentence not really doing anything. If you were to rewrite this sentence and get rid of some of the extra wording, it would look maybe like this. Students often write sentences in the passive voice. So we've got a subject up front, and we've got a verb here, and we've trimmed out some of the extra stuff. Grammatically, there's nothing wrong with the first version, but notice how the second one is a lot more direct, and readers will like that if they don't feel like their time is getting wasted. Look at a sentence like this one. I am of the opinion that this company should institute an improvement in the quality of the service provided by the company to its customers. Well, that's a lot of wording. It sounds like somebody's really trying to show off or something, but really the point is this company should improve their customer service. Try to get directly to the point. Another thing that you can do to improve your style is to work on making ideas flow so that they're not as choppy. Take a minute to pause this video right now and read over both the first version and the second version and think about what you notice about the difference. Go ahead and pause the video and think about this. So if you read the first one out loud, you probably heard a lot of short, choppy sentences. They all start, or almost all of them start the same way with the word I. It gets kind of repetitive, right? There's nothing grammatically wrong with this, but the writing sounds a little immature. Whereas if you combine some of these sentences and start maybe here with a dependent clause leading into the main clause, if you add connecting words like, if you add words like when or but that show relationships between ideas, if you combine those shorter, choppy sentences, the writing flows much, much more. Again, you can find more information about this on the handouts that I've posted in content. So those are some of the things I want you to think about when you're revising. Some pitfalls to avoid. Don't ignore your reader feedback. Remember that one of the course objectives is to respond to reader feedback and to make your writing better based on feedback that you get from your professor. So make sure that you address my feedback. If you're ever looking at a comment, a suggestion that I've made, and you don't understand it, make sure you get in touch with me. If you read a comment or some feedback that I've made and you don't agree with me, that would be a great thing for us to talk about. We can definitely try to work something out if you see your essay differently and if you have a different plan. But what you shouldn't simply do is ignore your feedback from me, unless, that is, you don't really want to get a good grade on the revision assignment. Also, another pitfall to avoid is to forget the requirements. Make sure that you're keeping in mind the original requirements for these papers, including the use of sources, the length requirements, things like that. Remember to revise holistically. Think about the domino effect. So if you change something in your essay, you need to think about how it affects the entire essay. And then avoid adding bad content. So obviously don't add plagiarism, don't add stuff that's off topic, don't add a paragraph that's filled with errors. If you avoid these pitfalls, chances are very good that your writing is going to improve and that your grade will go up as a result of revisions. So let's just review real quickly. When you revise, you should revise holistically. Think about the big picture. You should start with the big stuff, the essay and paragraph levels. Remember, you want to build the walls before you paint them. So start with issues of content and structure and work your way down after you're done with essay and paragraph level revisions to sentence level stuff, correctness and style, and always keep your audience and your purpose in mind. So those are some of the things to keep in mind. If you have any questions, let me know. What I want to leave you with today is that it's fun for me to grade revisions. I enjoy seeing how well my students improve over the course of the semester. So when I'm grading your revisions, I'm going to be looking for reasons to be happy with your progress. So I hope you enjoy the process of going back to earlier work and seeing how much better that you can make it based on all that you've learned this semester. Thanks for all the hard work you've been putting into class. I look forward to reading your revisions.